Section 1. You will hear a woman phoning the local council about an abandoned vehicle. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 6 on page 128. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Environmental Health Department, Paul speaking.
Oh, hello. I wanted to report a vehicle that's been left parked near where I live. I think it's been abandoned. I wondered if the council could arrange to get it towed away. Have I got through to the right department?
Yes, you have. If I could just take a few details. Your name, please?
Mrs. Shefford.
Thank you.
It's not my vehicle, though. I just thought someone ought to report it.
No, that's fine. What I need to do is take some details first, then we can decide what to do about the problem.
Oh, I see.
So the next thing I need to know is your address.
Right, it's 41 Lower Green Street.
Yes?
Barrowdale. And the postcode's WH4 5JP.
Fine. And if I could just ask for a telephone number.
It's 01778 552387. I'm out quite a lot, but you can just leave a message on the answer phone if you need to. Or I could give you my mobile number.
That's all right, don't worry. Now, could you tell me a little more about this vehicle? You say it's been abandoned.
Well, it certainly looks like it.
Can you give me an idea of where it is?
Yes, it's near the main road that goes through Barrowdale.
Is that the A69?
Yes, that's right. Now, there's a primary school just towards the end of the village, and then next to that, next to the children's playground, there's a field, and it's in there.
Oh. I wonder how it got in there.
Well, there's a gate to allow farm machinery in and out. I thought something ought to be done about it. The children from the school might start playing in the vehicle and lock themselves in or something.
Yes, you are quite right to report it. And what type of vehicle are we talking about here?
It's a van, actually. You know, the sort with just a couple of little windows at the back.
Right. You don't happen to know the make and model, do you?
Oh, yes. I went and had a look and got all the details. I thought you might need them. I'm surprised the school hasn't contacted you about it. Anyway, I wrote the details down. Right. It's a Catala, and the model's a Flyer 2000.
Is that Flyer?
That's right.
Very good. And the colour?
Well, it's not all that easy to see because it's absolutely filthy. And actually, it looks as if it's had a paint job at some stage. It's blue, but you can just see white underneath where it's been scratched.
Right. Well, I'll just make a note of the present colour, and if you could just tell me the vehicle number. Did you make a note of that?
Oh, yes. It's S322GEC.
Okay.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 7 to 10 on page 128. Now listen and answer questions 7 to 10.
And it sounds as if the general condition of the vehicle isn't too good, from what you say.
No, it's pretty poor. It wouldn't be drivable. It's got a flat tire and there's a crack in the windscreen. I reckon someone just wanted to get rid of it.
That's usually the way.
It's been there for nearly a week. No, it must be 8 days. I remember it was a Sunday morning when I noticed it. It wasn't there the day before. I walk past it most days on the way to the shops. I'd have thought the school would have reported it.
Does the field actually belong to the school?
No, it's part of Hill Farm Estate.
Right. I'll just make a note of that. And I don't suppose you have any information about who might own the vehicle?
No, I've no idea. So what will you do now?
Well, we'll come and have a look and see if we can trace the owner. And if we can't, the vehicle will be removed as rapidly as the law permits. It could be anything up to 20 days.
One thing I should say, I'm quite sure this doesn't belong to anyone round here. I'd definitely recognize it if it was from someone who lived here.
So you don't think it was anyone local? Right. I'd say at a guess we're looking at a stolen vehicle here.
I did wonder if it might have been. You hear such a lot about car thieves nowadays.
Well, we certainly will be looking into that possibility. Anyway, thank you for contacting us, Mrs. Shefford, and we'll keep you informed of what happens.
Right. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
That is the end of Section 1. You now have half a minute to check your answers. Now turn to Section 2 on page 129. Section 2. You will hear a tour guide talking to a group of tourists who are visiting a historic town on the east coast of the USA. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17 on page 129. Now listen carefully and answer questions 11 to 17.
Right. So here we are in Fairhaven, and we have a couple of hours to spend in this historic center before we carry on to our motel. And as you'll know from the itinerary of our trip, we're visiting Fairhaven because of its historical links with a man called Manjiro Nakahama. So I'll begin by giving you a brief overview of his life, and then you can explore the town at your leisure. Well, Manjiro Nakahama, as he was then known, was born in 1827 in a village by the sea in what is now Toshishimazu in Japan. And like many people in that town, he became a fisherman when he was just a youngster. One day in 1841, when he was just 14 years old, he and some others were fishing far off the coast of Japan when they were caught in a storm and shipwrecked on a small deserted island. They had to wait for 6 months before they were rescued by an American whale ship that had stopped at the island by chance. 4 of the 5 Japanese were put ashore in Hawaii, but Manjiro had become friends with the captain, William Whitfield, who came from the town of Fairhaven, where we are now, and he chose to remain aboard and to return with the boat to the USA. So Manjiro unwittingly became the first Japanese ever to set foot on American soil. He came back right here to Fairhaven with Whitfield and stayed with the Whitfield family, who paid for his education here in the town. He studied mathematics and geography, as well as shipbuilding and navigation. But he missed his mother and his own country, and eventually he went back to Japan, where he had a responsible position as a university teacher, and also served an invaluable role as interpreter during the initiation of relations between Japan and the United States in the middle of the 19th century. But the most interesting thing is that the links between Toshishimizu and Fairhaven have remained and grown stronger over the years, in spite of the distance between them. And in fact, the two places now have the official status of sister cities. Both places are ports, so in fact the inhabitants have a lot in common. There have been a number of visits by the inhabitants of Toshishimizu, in particular at the time of the festival, which is held every 2 years here in Fairhaven to celebrate the life and achievements of John Manjiro. It takes place in the fall, and there's an ever-growing program including drumming, singing, martial arts, and stalls selling Japanese and American food. So if you're going to be in the region around then, it's really worth a visit.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20 on page 129. Now listen and answer questions 18 to 20.
Now, many of the buildings that Manjiro Nakahama knew in Fairhaven are still standing today. And so if you'd just like to hand round some copies of this map, I'll suggest the best route to follow to see them. Okay, so if you look at the bottom of the map, you can see the Millicent Library, and that's where we are now. Now, to follow the John Manjiro Trail, you go out of here along Center Street and then head up Main Street until you get to Pilgrim Avenue. Go down there and turn right at the end. Go straight on, and just on the corner with Oxford Street, you'll see a 2-story house. This is the Whitfield family house, and this is where Manjiro first stayed when he came to Fairhaven. It's still a private residence, so please respect the owner's privacy. Okay, now if you carry on along Oxford Street, then turn left at the end, you'll come to North Street, and about halfway down there is what's known as Old Oxford School. This was the very same school that Manjiro attended when he lived here. It was considered to be the best school in town because of the quality of the building. Unusually, it was built of stone, and the quality of the teaching. Nowadays, it's usually closed, except on special occasions. Go on to the end of North Street and turn the corner onto Adams Street. If you follow the road down back towards the library, you go round a couple of sharp bends, and on the second of these, you can see the School of Navigation, which Manjiro also attended. And if you follow the road on, you'll soon find yourself back here at the library. And I'd suggest you spend some time looking round that too, if you have any time left. Right. Now, does anyone have any questions?
That is the end of section 2. You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turn to section 3, on page 102 of your book. You will hear a student called Sarah talking to her college tutor about some research she has to do as part of her course. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 27. Now listen and answer questions 21 to 27.
Hello, Sarah.
Hi.
So, you want to talk about your research project?
That's right. I want to find out how many people use the Tourist Information Office and what they think of the service they get.
Interesting. Have you written your proposal yet?
No, that's what I wanted to ask you about. What should I include? Someone said I should make a list of my aims first.
Well, I don't know about a list. A statement of aims is the correct term. It's just a quick summary of what you hope to get out of the project.
OK, and should I include other documents I've prepared, like the questionnaire? I'm still working on that.
I can check that later, but I think it's good to prepare an information sheet for participants. It would help you to think about interview methods. It'd be good to see that soon.
Oh, right. And I want the project to have statistical data, not just to be a collection of opinions.
That's good. So that should be clear from the proposal too.
Great. So what else must I include in the proposal? Or are some things optional?
OK, some things that people normally put in a research proposal don't really apply to you, like any costs involved. That can be really important in some research projects, but as we don't have a budget, it's not something you need to include. Any costs have to come out of your own pocket, I'm afraid.
Yes, I understand that.
But I do need to know your criteria for choosing who to interview. I've got to check that you're using good sampling principles, for example.
Sure. And what about the way I'm going to analyse my findings?
That's not essential at the proposal stage on this project, but if you've got some ideas, include them, because it could save time later.
OK. And do I need to make it clear how the report will be organised?
Oh, I'm going to be giving you a template to use, so there's no need to go into that in the proposal.
Great, thanks.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 28 to 30. Now listen and answer questions 28 to 30.
Actually, another thing we could discuss now is making sound recordings of interviews.
Oh, right. Do I have to record them all? I could try to get as many as possible, but it'd be rather expensive.
Yes, don't worry. You only need a few chosen randomly just to give an idea of how the interviews are going. You can send one in each time you update me on your progress.
OK. How often should I do that? I haven't done a timetable for the interviews yet, but they'll be spread over 3 or 4 weeks, with about 200 in total. I reckon on doing 20 a day.
Let me know how you're getting on at the end of each day's interviewing then, whether you've had any problems or not. It can be a lonely job.
Thanks. I appreciate that.
And what about the confidentiality of participants? Because that can cause problems.
Well, I'm getting them to sign a consent form. It says that I'll only use the information for my research, that I won't pass it on to anyone else. But that's the only promise I'm making. They have to give me their names and agree to their data being stored on the college computer network.
That sounds good. You won't put names in your report, I know, and the data will all get deleted at the end of the year, but we don't promise any of that.
Sure.
That is the end of section 3. You now have half a minute to check your answer.
Now turn to section 4 on page 103 of your book. You will hear part of a lecture about the wildlife on Christmas Island in the Pacific Ocean. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 35. Now listen and answer questions 31 to 35.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm talking about Christmas Island in the Pacific Ocean and its incredible wildlife. First of all, let me explain that Christmas Island is a remote tropical island about 2,600 kilometres northwest of Australia, covering an area of 135 square kilometres with 73 kilometres of coastline. Around 85 square kilometres has now been made into a national park by the Australian government in recognition of the island's unique and threatened wildlife. Although there's great potential for tourism on the island, the most significant economic activity is currently mining, as there's a good supply of phosphates in the local rock. The role of the national park is therefore to protect the wildlife rather than to attract visitors. Like other remote islands, Christmas Island has a number of unique and endangered species, some of which are already extinct or under threat of extinction. 2 rodent species are known to have died out, as has 1 species of bat, and a number of reptile and bird species are seriously threatened. The best known of all the island's creatures, however, are its land crabs, which are found in large numbers and which are essential to the island's ecology. And for an 18-day period each year, one of the island's 14 crab species, the red crab, becomes the centre of widespread attention as it makes its spectacular migration to the sea to breed. More about that in a moment. Aware of the need to do more to protect the fragile ecosystem on Christmas Island, the Australian government has commissioned a report from the expert working group it has set up to investigate the problem. Previous inquiries by government-appointed committees did lead to the setting up of the national park, so there is much to hope for.
Before you hear the rest of the lecture, you have some time to look at questions 36 to 40. Now listen and answer questions 36 to 40.
So, back to the red crab, which has attracted quite a bit of media attention in recent years. The red crab is found all over Christmas Island and is vital to its ecosystem. Although they do sometimes eat snails and other smaller creatures, the crab's diet is largely made up of leaves, with the addition of flowers and seedlings when these are available. Their droppings then provide an important fertilizer for the island's soil. Also, by turning over the soil when digging the holes, called burrows where they live, the crabs help the propagation of plant species. Although you might think that an animal that goes in for mass migration would be quite sociable by nature, each red crab actually spends most of the year living alone in its burrow, and so is actually quite solitary. Each crab constructs a burrow in the earth, with one chamber inside and one tunnel entrance, and stays there most of the time, especially during the dry season. The crabs are more active in the rainy season, and that's also when the famous migration occurs. It isn't the rain that triggers the migration, however, so much as the phase of the moon and the state of the tides. Trying to predict when the migration will occur is quite difficult, as it can be as early as October or as late as December, depending on the year, although it's usually sometime in November, in fact. And when it comes, the migration is quite spectacular, with literally millions of crabs heading for the seashore at the same time. Conservationists do their best to limit the number of road casualties among the crabs by closing certain roads, encouraging car sharing, and other measures to reduce traffic, even constructing bridges for the crabs at certain key points. So before I go on to the...
That is end of section for you. Now have half a minute to check your answers.